So what can you do? What do you do? You've seen the problem, haven't you? Maybe you've seen it for years. Maybe you felt it every time you climbed the stairs. Every time you caught your reflection in the window. Every time you promised yourself that tomorrow would be different. What do you do now? Because isn't that the hardest part? Not seeing the problem, not admitting it, actually doing something about it. How many times have you told yourself you'll start on Monday? How many Mondays have come and gone? How many plans have you made? How many diets? How many promises? And when those promises broke, did you stop trusting yourself? What if that's the real damage? It's not the weight, it's not the tiredness, it's not the years that slip by. The loss of trust in your own word. Because if you don't believe in yourself anymore, how do you move forward? So maybe we should stop asking how to change your whole life. Maybe that's too big. Maybe that's why it feels impossible. What if the better question is this? Can you change the next hour? Not next year. Not 6 months from now. Not by summer. The next hour. Could you drink a glass of water? Could you step outside? Could you walk to the end of the road and back? Could you choose one thing that helps instead of hurts? Would that really be too small? Have you forgotten how powerful small things can be? After all, does a tree appear overnight? Does a sunrise happen all at once? Does a child grow up in a single day? Then why do we expect ourselves to change that way? Why do we demand miracles from people who are already struggling? Why do we speak to ourselves with cruelty? And what if you've been carrying that voice for years? The voice that says, what's the point? The damage is done. You're too far gone. But what if that voice is wrong? What if you believed it for so long that you stopped questioning it? What if the person at rock bottom isn't weak? What if they're exhausted? What if they're carrying years of disappointment, years of stress, years of putting everyone else first, years of surviving instead of living? And if that's true, shouldn't we show them some grace? Shouldn't we give them a chance? Because tell me something. What if you didn't need motivation today? What if you didn't need confidence? What if you didn't need the perfect plan? What if all you needed was one small win, one promise kept, one step taken, one walk, one choice, one moment where you prove to yourself that you're still here, still fighting, still capable, still alive? Wouldn't that be enough for today? And if you can do it today, couldn't you do it tomorrow? And if you can do it tomorrow, what happens next week? Next month? Next year? Who might you become? And who may still be waiting beneath all that doubt? So don't worry about climbing the mountain, not today. Just stand up. Just take the first step. Because every journey back begins the same way, with a single decision. And maybe, just maybe, that decision starts tonight. What if the first step doesn't look like much? What if nobody notices it? What if there's no music, no applause, no dramatic change? Just you, a door, a pair of shoes, and a body that doesn't really want to move. Would that still count? Would it still matter? Because maybe this is where people get it wrong. Maybe they think change has to begin loudly, with a new plan, a new identity, new version of themselves. But what if real change begins quietly? What if it begins with a walk? Not because walking fixes everything, but because staying still hasn't. When was the last time you walked without running from something, without scrolling, without judging yourself, without turning your whole life into punishment? When was the last time you let your mind breathe? Because maybe the walk isn't just exercise. Maybe it's a conversation between the person you've become and the person still waiting underneath. Maybe every step asks a question. Are you really finished? Are you really too far gone? Is this really all there is? Have you just been standing still for too long? Maybe at first the body complains. Maybe the knees ache. Maybe the back feels heavy. Maybe the breathing feels harder than it should. Maybe a voice says, this is embarrassing. This is pointless. This won't change anything. What if that voice has been wrong before? What if the first walk isn't about burning calories? What if it's about proving something, not to the world, not to the mirror, not to anyone watching, but to yourself? What if it's about saying, I still have a say in this, I can still move, I can still begin? And isn't that powerful? To take a body that has felt forgotten, a mind that has felt trapped, a life that has felt stuck, and move it forward, even slowly, even badly, even for 10 minutes. Because what is 10 minutes really? Too small to matter, or small enough to repeat. And isn't that the secret? Not the perfect workout, not the extreme plan, not destroying yourself to prove you're serious, but doing something gentle enough that you can return tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Could that be how trust is rebuilt, step by step? Could that be how shame begins to loosen? Could that be how hope enters the body again? Not all at once, but through the feet, through the breath, through the quiet rhythm of moving forward. One day, maybe you won't remember the exact walk. Maybe you won't remember the weather. Maybe you won't remember what you wore. But you may remember that feeling. That strange moment when something inside you whispered, maybe I'm not finished. And what if that was enough? What if the walk wasn't small? What if it was the first sign of life? What if the road outside your door was never just a road? What if it was an invitation, a way back, a beginning, quiet rebellion against everything that told you to stay down? So don't run, and don't punish yourself. Don't try to become someone else in one day. Just walk. And while you walk, ask yourself one question. If I can take this step, what else might still be possible? Are you waiting? Waiting to feel ready, waiting for Monday, waiting for the right mood, waiting until life gets easier, waiting until the pain becomes bad enough, waiting until someone comes along and saves you. But what if nobody's coming? What if that isn't cruel? What if it's freedom? Because if nobody's coming, doesn't that mean the first move is yours? Doesn't that mean you still have power? Maybe not over everything, maybe not over the past, maybe not over what happened to you, maybe not over the years that slipped away, but over this moment, over this choice, over the next thing you do. Isn't there still something there? Small piece of control, small piece of strength, small piece of you. Because how many of us wait for confidence before we act? But what if confidence doesn't come first? What if confidence is built afterward? What if it grows from the things you were brave enough to do while still afraid? Many people never start because they don't feel like the person who can do it. But how could you feel like the person before you become that person? What if the version of you you're waiting for is created by the steps you're avoiding? What if the stronger you is not ahead of you waiting? What if they're inside the walk, inside the morning you didn't want to go up, inside the meal you choose differently, inside the promise you finally kept? Could that be where they are? Could that be why waiting hurts so much? Because every day you wait for a feeling. You delay the evidence that could create it. Maybe that's why rock bottom feels so heavy. Not only because life is hard, but because deep down, you know you're still capable of more. And isn't that why it hurts? Because something inside you refuses to fully give up. Even when you're tired, even when you're ashamed, even when you pretend not to care, something still whispers, this isn't me. This isn't the end. I was made for more than this. So why do we ignore that voice? Why do we believe the voice that says we can't, but down the voice that says we can? Why do we give more loyalty to fear than hope? What has fear ever built for you? Has it made you healthier? Has it made you calmer? Has it made you proud? Has it given you peace? Has it kept you in the same place, calling it safety? Now maybe readiness is overrated. Maybe motivation is unreliable. Maybe the perfect moment is a lie. Maybe the only real question is this: can you move before you feel ready? Can you act before you believe? Can you take one step while still carrying doubt? Because maybe courage is in the absence of doubt. Maybe courage is walking with doubt beside you, not letting it lead. So what are you waiting for? The healed version, the disciplined version, the confident version, the version that finally has everything figured out. What if they are waiting for you? What if they are watching from the future, begging you to begin, begging you to stop delaying the life they are trying to live? What if today is the moment you stop waiting? Not because it feels easy, not because waiting has cost enough, and not because you're ready, but because you're tired of being ruled by the idea that you're not. So ask yourself, what would you do today if you finally understood that the person you were waiting for is built by the person you are right now? Why do we only respect change when it's visible? Why do we wait for the before and after photo? The smaller waist, the stronger body, the new face, the different clothes. Why do we only believe progress when other people can see it? What about the victories nobody notices? What about the morning you got up when you wanted to disappear under the covers? What about the walk you took when everything in you wanted to stay still? What about the glass of water, the better meal, the earlier nights, the moments you didn't give up on yourself? Do those not count? We've been taught to ignore the things that actually saves us. Because rock bottom rarely ends with one dramatic moment. It ends quietly, one choice at a time. One small act of self-respect at a time. One ordinary decision that nobody claps for. And maybe that's why so many people quit. Because they think nothing is happening. The scale hasn't changed. The mirror hasn't changed. Their energy hasn't fully returned. Nobody has noticed. Nobody has said you look different. So they think it's not working. But what if it is? What if healing begins before it becomes visible? What if the first change is not in the body, but in the promise? What if the first sign of progress is not weight loss, but trust? The moment you say you're going to do something, and you actually do it, could that be bigger than we think? Could that be the foundation everything else stands on? Because how do you rebuild a life without trust? How do you rebuild a body without patience? How do you rebuild a mind without kindness? And how do you keep going if you only celebrate the finish line? Maybe we need to celebrate the quiet victories, the ones nobody photographs, the ones nobody posts, the ones that happen in the kitchens, bedrooms, pavements, and silent mornings, the ones that look boring from the outside, but feel like survival on the inside. Because isn't that what this is? Survival becoming structure, structure becoming strength, and strength becoming identity, and identity becoming life again. Maybe today you didn't transform, but did you try? Maybe today you didn't feel amazing, but did you show up? Maybe today you didn't become the person you want to be, but did you refuse to abandon them? Maybe that matters. Maybe it matters more than you know. Because every time you keep a promise, send a message to the part of you that stopped believing. You say, look, I'm still here. I still care. I'm coming back for you. What if that part of you has been waiting years to hear this? What if all this time you didn't need another punishment? What if you needed proof? Proof that you can change, proof that you can return, proof that you're not as lost as you feared. So don't dismiss the quiet victories. Don't laugh at the small steps. Don't call them nothing. Because the life you want may not be built by one huge decision. It may be built by hundreds of tiny ones, repeated, protected, and respected. One day, when people finally notice, when they ask what changed, will they understand? Will they know about the mornings, the walks, the doubts, the silent battles, the choices nobody saw? Maybe not, but you will. Maybe that's enough. What do you see when you look in the mirror? Do you see a body, a mistake, failure? A reminder of all the times you said you would change and didn't? Do you see a human being, tired, wounded, still trying, and still here? When did the mirror become a courtroom? When did the reflection become evidence against you? When did you learn to stand there and judge yourself like an enemy? Would you speak that way to someone you love? Would you speak that way to your child, to your best friend, to someone who was hurting? Would you point at every flaw, every scar, and every weakness? Would you tell them they were hopeless? Would you tell them they were disgusting? Would you tell them it was too late? And why do you say it to yourself? How long have you been doing that? How many years have you stood in front of yourself, not looking for life, but looking for proof that you weren't enough? What if the mirror has never been the problem? What if the voice beside it was? The voice that compares, the voice that mocks, the voice that remembers every failure, but forgets every battle you survived. Isn't that strange? Remember the weight, you remember the photos you hate, remember the clothes that stop fitting, remember the shame. But do you remember what you were carrying? The stress, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the years of pushing through, the pain you never spoke about, the disappointment you swallowed, the life that slowly drained you. What if the body in front of you is not the enemy? What if it's the record of what you endured? And if that's true, does it need hatred? Does it need help? Maybe this is where the way back changes. Because you can't punish yourself into movement for a while. You can't shame yourself into a diet. You can hate yourself in the gym. But can you hate yourself into peace? Can you hate yourself into healing? Can you hate yourself into a life worth living? Does something deeper have to happen? What if change begins the moment you stop declaring war on yourself? What if the mirror becomes less of a sentence and more of a conversation? What if instead of saying, "Look what you've become," you say, "Look what you survived"? What if instead of saying, "You ruined everything," you say, "You lost your way, but you're coming back"? Would that make you weak? Would that finally make change possible? Because maybe the person in the mirror doesn't need another insult. Maybe they don't need another impossible demand. Maybe they don't need another Monday promise. Maybe they need someone to stand there and say, "I see you. I know you're tired. I know you're ashamed. But I'm not leaving you here." Can you imagine that? Being on your own side again. Not pretending everything is fine. And not lying to yourself. Not avoiding responsibility, but taking responsibility without cruelty. Could that be strength? Could that be what self-respect actually is? It's not arrogance. It's not perfection. Not loving every part of yourself every day, but refusing to treat yourself like something disposable. So look again. Slowly, honestly, without running, without flinching, without turning the mirror into a weapon. Who is standing there? Is it really someone beyond saving? Or is it someone who has been waiting for kindness long enough? Someone who still has time. Someone who still has choices. Someone who still has a life beneath the damage. Maybe the reflection won't change overnight. Maybe the body will take time. Maybe the mind will resist. Maybe some days you will still hear the old voice. But what if another voice can grow louder? The one that says, I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to bring you back. Maybe one day you won't look in the mirror and see everything wrong. Maybe one day you'll see the person who refused to stay broken. Maybe that will be enough to keep going. What if this is not the end? What if the years behind you are not proof that the years ahead must be the same? What if the person you thought was gone is not gone? What if they're buried under tiredness, under shame, under disappointment, under every broken promise, under every season where survival was all you could manage? But buried doesn't mean dead, does it? Lost doesn't mean finished. Delayed doesn't mean denied. What if there's still a life waiting for you? Not a perfect life. Not a life without pain. Not a life where every morning feels easy. But a life where you wake up and feel present again. A life where your body feels like home instead of a burden. A life where walking is not punishment. Food is not comfort. The mirror is not an enemy. And discipline is not a prison. What if that life is possible? What if it's closer than you think? Not because everything changes tomorrow, but because something already changed. You stood up, you walked, you stopped waiting. You noticed the quiet victories, looked in the mirror, chose not to abandon yourself. Isn't that how people come back? Not in one heroic moment, but slowly, quietly, repeatedly. Return to themselves, step by step, day by day, and choice by choice. Maybe that doesn't sound dramatic enough. But what could be more powerful than a person who thought they were finished, beginning again? What could be more moving than someone at rock bottom, finding one small reason to climb? What could be more beautiful than watching a life return to someone who had forgotten what it felt like? Because maybe the world teaches us to admire the finished transformation, the new body, the new confidence, the new success story. What about the beginning? What about the person sitting in silence, wondering if it's too late? What about the person taking the first walk, hoping nobody sees how hard it is? What about the person choosing differently for the first time in years? What about the person trying again after failing so many times? They almost stopped believing. Isn't that where the real miracle is? Not at the finish line, but at the moment they refuse to disappear. So if that's you, if you're listening to this and you're on the bottom, if your body feels heavy, if your mind feels tired, if your life feels smaller than it used to, can I ask you something? What if you're not behind? What if you're being rebuilt? What if this chapter is not here to shame you, but to wake you? What if the pain you feel now becomes the reason you finally chose yourself? And what if one day, not today, not tomorrow, but one day, you look back at this version of you, the one who was tired, the one who was scared, the one who didn't know how to begin. And instead of hating them, you thanked them because you stood up when it mattered, took the walk, made the choice, carried you from the beginning. And maybe, that's the truth, we forgot. The person at rock bottom is not the weakest version of you. Maybe they're the bravest. Because they are the one who has to begin with nothing. No proof, no confidence, and no applause. Just a small voice asking, what if I try one more time? If that voice is still there, even faintly, then maybe it's not over. Maybe the way back has already started. Maybe the life waiting for you isn't far away. Maybe it's built inside the next choice, the next walk, the next promise, the next morning. Maybe one day you'll realize the person you were trying to become was never as far away as you thought. They were waiting beneath the pain, beneath the doubt, beneath the years, waiting for you to come back, slowly if you must, quietly if you need to, imperfectly if that's all you can do. But come back, because your life is still here. Maybe, just maybe, so are you.